This is Kim Hammer on the Kim Hammer Show. Thank you for listening. You can go up to my website in order to get some of the information that we're going to be looking at on the show today to www.thekimhammershow.com. That's www.thekimhammershow.com. What we're going to do today is we're going to replay a segment or a show back from May 1st. And on May 1st, I had a panel of legislators in that were very instrumental in passing legislation to address some of the election integrity issues that we felt were existing in Arkansas at that time. This past week, we were rewarded for our work in that the Heritage Foundation, which is a national organization, for the first time scored states on their election integrity scorecard. As a result of the work that we did this past legislative session, we tied as the fourth most secure state in the nation when it comes to election integrity. Obviously, our goal is that we want to be number one, and there'll be areas that they have pointed out on their scorecard that we will be working on. But we had a show a couple of weeks ago where I had the Secretary of State's office in talking about all the various aspects of do we need to do a forensic audit and all those type of things that people are having such a buzz about. But what we wanted to do today, because of this report card coming out this week, is replay that show from back in the first weekend of May that explains the bills that we did that helped us get as high as a score as we did on the Heritage Foundation election integrity scorecard. You can see a copy of that scorecard by going up to my website, thekimhammershow.com. We have it on there. You can click on it and go through all the details. We are right up there with states like Florida and Georgia. That should make you, as an Arkansan, feel safe and secure that when you get ready to go vote in any of the elections between now, but especially in 22, that you can know that your vote is going to count and be counted for. I hope that you enjoy this show as it talks about the legislation that we got passed this last session. And I want to say thank you to all the fellow legislators that made it possible that we are as high as a state as we are when it comes to election integrity. Hope you enjoy the show.
It's time for the Kim Hammer Show, where you'll learn how your state government affects you, your family, and community. Here's Kim Hammer.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining me here on the Kim Hammer Show. Hope you're having a great day. We are going to give you one of the more informative shows that you've ever listened to on the Kim Hammer Show. I've got my own power panel assembled today, so eat your heart out, Dave. And this is a power panel on election laws that we passed this past session. So I have with me in studio Representative Mark Lowry, Senator Mark Johnson. On the phone, I've got Representative Carl Wing, and Representative Jack Ladyman should be calling in here in just a little bit, and that was about all the studio and the phone lines could hold, okay? So it's not that anybody else is any better than anybody else. It's just this was the room that I had. We had a lot of key players this session as far as helping craft the legislative laws that we've got, and for the purpose of just only having an hour and the number of bills that we've got that we're going to discuss, I've kind of narrowed it down to these four. So there were a lot of other team players, and you guys can help me out by calling out their names in a little bit as we go along, referencing the bills and those that helped out. So, all right, we got Carlton Wing on the phone. Carlton, are you with us today on the Kim Hammer Show?
Yes, sir. Happy to be here.
Great. Glad to have you. And I think I see Representative Jack Ladyman is calling in now. So let's give us just a second to get him on the phone. And Representative Ladyman, is that you out here on the phone now?
Yes, it is.
Very good. All right. First of all, Jack, and for the purpose of, I've only got an hour, so if we say senator and representative every time we say our name, we're going to eat up 30 minutes of the show.
And then you got Mark and Mark.
And then you got the Mark and Mark over here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I got to be looking at y'all. Let me ask, are any of y'all kind of in a wasteland after the week that we had? Have y'all come back to life yet, or are y'all still kind of numb?
I slept like a baby last night, Kim. I really did. It's the first time I've slept well in several weeks, really. So I'm good. I'm ready to go. Let's go do it again for another 108 days.
Slap you.
Well, yeah,
I'll tell
I'm
you,
back to life, but the only thing that got me rejuiced was just going back and seeing pictures that were taken by house photographers and seeing that I actually had some situations where I had a smile on my face during the session. So I guess it wasn't as bad as I thought at times.
Was that as you were walking in the door when it started? As you
Well,
walked out the door when it
probably.
finished? Yeah. How about you, Carlton?
I'm still a little numb. It takes me longer to recover, I guess.
Well, hey, you're the furthest one away, so we know it takes a while to catch up. You had to drive home, so hey,
Yeah, that's true.
hey, Jack. Most people may not realize where Jack Ladyman serves, so tell them about your geographical district up there, would you?
Yeah, my district is 59. It's North and West Craighead County. That's Jonesboro that most people are familiar with. Bono, Cache, Egypt, but about a third of Jonesboro.
Okay, all right. And Carlton, we've had you on the show before. Have you come out of your unconscious state yet after 108 days? Or are you alive and well?
I'm working on it. I tell you what, I feel a little bit like the character Mushu in the movie Mulan. That was the one that Eddie Murphy was when he was talking about he'd gone through something traumatic, and he said, "Watch my eye twitch." It's just a little bit of trauma after all this has gone through, but very grateful for the work. But we certainly learned a lot of lessons during this session, and having to deal with a lot of misinformation, which I'm sure we'll get into here short in order.
Yep. And that's why this is the focus of the Kim Hammer Show today and all the election bills that we ran, because there is a lot of misinformation out there, misrepresentation, a lot of hype, and a lot of hypocrisy, too, for that matter. And so this show is to clear the air and hear it factually as far as what each of these bills, and we'll try to get to all of them as we go through the program today. But that's the intent of it. So if you had somebody that was shouting, phrases or terms, that was maybe spreading falsehood, this is a good show for you to share with them so that they can hear the truth and be set free from the lies that have been told and some of the misrepresentations. All right, Mark, we didn't get to you geographically. You're Maumelle and where else?
Primarily Maumelle, but I also take in Oak Grove, Marche, part of North Little Rock.
Okay, and Mark, you and I bump into each other out there.
We do, but I bump into your district on the south end. You have a little bit of Pulaski County. I have the northern part of West Pulaski County. I include most of Maumelle, and I go up and take in most of Perry, all of Conway County, a large part of Faulkner County, and about a third of Van Buren County. So I go all the way to 4 miles north of Clinton. So I've got a long and very rural district.
Yeah, you got some of my old stomping grounds because I graduated Southside B Branch.
And so we talked about that. So did my mother.
Oh, I knew there was kindred spirit there.
Of course, yeah.
Hey, quick story. When I was hospice chaplain, we had a patient in our inpatient unit one day, and we got to visiting. You try to connect dots and everything. And if you ever drive Southside B Branch up there by the school, those big white stones that are there.
Yes.
She was in the class that put those white stones out. Now, back then, and that's been like 5-6 years ago, she was 93, so she was well up in years, but she had all of her cognitive skills, and we got to talk about, the old gym and about those white stones getting laid in there,
Right.
and it was just totally
My mother
cool.
was the valedictorian of the class of 1945.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, I graduated with 18. I don't know how many your mama graduated with, but
I don't know how big it was, but she was number one.
yeah, I didn't have any of those letters behind my name. All I had was the superintendent saying, "Thank God," and Greyhound, he's gone. So anyway.
Graduated, thank you, Loudy.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you, Lonnie. We can take this on the road if this politics thing doesn't work
Hey,
out.
this is today the Kim Hammer Comedy Show. So anyway, we got a lively group. But all right, so I got a stack of purple folders, which I had somebody tell me in the Capitol one day, I hate seeing those purple folders, just because this represents the stack of the election bills that we ran. The one thing I want to say, and y'all chime in on this, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to be like Johnny Carson, the folder, okay? And we're going to pull up the folders as I got them in the stack, and we're going to work our way through them. But the one thing I would like to commend y'all, and y'all help me out. We'll just start throwing out some names. Carolyn Brown helped on this.
Justin Gonzalez.
Justin Gonzalez,
Right.
who else? AJ.
Of course, we can't say enough about A.J. Kelly, who's our attorney and former Deputy Secretary of State, and just probably the foremost election law expert in the state of Arkansas. He was just tremendous.
Yep.
And of course, Christy
Josh.
McKinnon, the
Yeah.
former, the current chairman of the Pulaski County Election Commission, who was chairman, or was a member of the commission last year when a lot of these things happened.
Yeah. Who did you say, Carlton, or start to say?
Josh Bryant carried one. Keith Brooks did a great
Yeah.
job
Yes.
as well.
Yep. Doug House. We got to remember Doug House.
Oh, the amazing Doug House.
And Doug, of course, a former state representative, now assistant attorney general, and was detailed by the attorney general to help us sort out some of the legal issues. Great staff at BLR. I don't even want to. They like to stay below the radar, but
Yeah.
that's the Bureau of Legislative Research, who is the staff of the legislature. They just did a tremendous job under long hours and a lot of pressure.
Yeah. And I'm going to call her name
And
out.
Michelle,
Yeah. Michelle.
Michelle Davenport,
Yeah.
who did most of the election bills. Yeah, she was great.
and still is.
Yes. And disclaimer, okay? Michelle is one of the attorneys that works at BLR. She is totally bipartisan, and there's that legal lawyer client confidentiality. In no way, shape, or form influenced anything. What happens with our attorneys at the Bureau is we bring them the ideas, they craft them, we work back and forth. But a lot of people worked her and all the other staff very hard this session. So that's why we bring her name up, not because she weighed in on anything. She just said,
Without
yes,
getting
sir,
too
no,
far in
sir.
the weeds on that, Kim. Let me just, for a lot of the public doesn't understand, the Bureau of Legislative Research is bipartisan, nonpartisan. They are our staff. We say, hey, I want a bill that does this, and they help us turn that into a law that works and doesn't create unforeseen problems. It's a highly respected organization, and Marty Garrity, the director, that's a lady, Mrs. Martha Garrity, and her staff do a tremendous job for all 135 members of the legislature.
Yep. Jack, did
Yeah,
we
and
leave any?
what some people may not understand about BLR is, they have to react quickly. We make changes. We give them information. They try to keep us between the ditches on the legalities of things, and they have to react very quickly. And Michelle was very, very good at that.
All right. Anybody else's name we failed to mention? Maybe it'll come up. But and part of the reason I wanted to do that was to let y'all know that are listening, we didn't just pull this out of a hat. We kind of assessed the landscape both at the national level, but specifically here at the state level, where things had been discovered through cases and through depositions, and also eyewitness account of things that had happened. And all that's going to come out in the future when we have some meetings, in the future and be able to substantiate a little bit more. We had on the Kim Hammer Show, we had Chris Lancaster, or Clint Lancaster, who had actually gone out of state and worked on the Trump campaign and, enlightened some things that were similar to some things that happened here in Arkansas. And this has actually been being developed since before January. And one of the things that we all wanted to work together to do, and that was we didn't want to present one massive bill. What we did was we kind of all took a piece of the pie and broke it into bite-sized pieces so everybody could see the transparency of the issues based on individual law being written to that. Mark?
And let me mention also another name that really helped us, especially since we had so many different pieces, was the House Majority Leader, Austin McCollum. Over on our side, he made sure that we had ample opportunity to present these bills as they were developed to the House caucus. He and I believe Carlton worked really hard on getting, it's really nice when you can present a bill and you've got 40, 45 co-sponsors on there. You hope that you're not going to lose any of those and you're going to gain the rest to get your majority. And we ended up with close to super majorities on several of these bills. I know the Ballot Integrity Act and the absentee ballot. And so I know we're going to talk about the individual bills, but it was great having that kind of support.
Okay, go ahead.
Can I say one thing quick about that? We were criticized for having 18 bills or whatever. I think it was 18. and coordinating and all that. But I think it was really great because each one of these bills attacked one issue, and it made it, like you said, transparent, and people understood what the issue was, and it had a lot of clarity to it. So I think it was a great thing, even though we were criticized for it.
Well, sometimes when you get criticized, it's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because you're doing something right. They don't like the fact that you're doing it right because they're doing it wrong.
Well, my old friend that was a B-17 pilot in World War II told me that when you start catching flack, you know you're over the target.
Yep, that's right. When they're shooting at you, they're shooting at you for a reason. So,
Yeah.
okay, here we go. The first one, and what I'm going to do is I am going to pull them off the stack, but because we got 4 folks on the line, each one helped carry the legislation. We're going to start off with House Bill 1715, which is now Act 736, which means it's been signed by the governor into law. And so Act 736 is one that Representative Lowry carried. The title is an act to amend Arkansas law concerning absentee ballots, to amend the election law, and to amend the law concerning voting by absentee ballot, to amend the law concerning spoiled ballots, and for other purposes. All right, Mark, I'm going to give you and everybody chime in, and let's try to get discussion on this one on a 5-minute time frame just to get started.
Sure. Well, this was a major piece. It ran through the House and the Senate early on. I think it maybe flew under the radar a little bit in terms of its significance. One of the issues that we've had has been a whole lot of ballot harvesting with absentee ballots.
And what is ballot harvesting?
Ballot harvesting is where you have individuals who are, taking batches of absentee ballot applications that have not even been requested by voters, and they find voters, or they match up voters, or they match up phantom voters with these applications. So one thing that we've done to limit that is that, current law allows possession of 10 ballots to create this rebuttable presumption of intent to fraud. We've lowered that to 4. Now, that election officials, administrators can still have more than that, but an individual, like for one of these groups that try to tell us that they are nonpartisan and only seem to attack Republicans, we don't want them taking stacks and stacks of applications. It also helps us in terms of comparing the voter registration application to the absentee application, comparing those signatures, making sure it's the correct person. One thing that we changed this session is doing away with the sworn statement. This was a totally different bill related to voter ID. And now when people send in their absentee ballot, they will not be able to just sign a sworn statement. They will be sending a photocopy of their voter ID. The reason for that is there's no uniform standard for verifying signatures. As a matter of fact, as soon as we give the other side the right to use signatures, then they start talking about, people's signatures change over time. Well, then fine. Let's go back to an absolute standard, which is the ID. Yep. We also, I mentioned the unsolicited absentees. The county clerk shall not distribute unsolicited absentee ballot applications. Access the inner envelope simply adds clarification that the inner envelope that the absentee ballot is in shall not be opened any earlier than 8:30 a.m. on Election Day. And it also cancels spoiled ballots. It requires a stamp marked canceled on the face of the ballot. Poll workers must initial the spoiled ballot, write and sign the name. The reason for this is because there were a lot of ballots that were canceled that somehow ended up getting counted in Pulaski County. And we believe that a good number of those turned the race against, for instance, Representative Jim Servillo in favor of Ashley Hudson.
So spoiled ballot, define spoiled ballot for those who don't know what that means.
Well, a spoiled ballot could be a ballot that the Election Commission has looked at and they have found some discrepancy, something that doesn't match up, their signature, and there could be actually it's spoiled. Actually,
example, Kim, when I voted in 2018 in the primary, they actually had multiple precincts at my polling place, and they gave me the wrong ballot. And so because they had given it to me and marked it as handed out, they had to mark it as a spoiled ballot, but until they found the correct ballot to give me. And that one went into a specific place. So if it's a loose live ballot laying around until it's marked as canceled, and that's what this bill that Representative
And you know,
Lowry
it's
has.
really interesting. League of Women Voters, the pushback we got, they focused on this thing. Well, why in the world do we need to buy a stamp? Every polling place is going to have a stamp, and this is going to be the things that they landed on were so laughable. We need that, and hopefully it's going to be stamped in red ink so that it's easy to discern that this is a ballot that should not be counted.
Right. And Jack and Carlton, y'all can weigh in on this because I want to make sure the conversation involves us all. What I remember, one thing being said in that meeting is not everybody's handwriting is legible, number one.
Right.
Number two, depending on where you mark it, determines whether or not it gets clearly seen.
Yeah.
And one of the things we want to do by bringing consistency, and I can't remember, Carlton or Jack, one of y'all brought it up about the need for consistency so that whenever a ballot is stamped canceled, that it is blatantly obvious that is it. Jack, Carlton, you guys got anything to weigh in on that one?
I was going to mention that, Kim, that they're clearly identified as being canceled, so that there's no confusion. Because if you watch some of these ballots being moved around, on TV or whatever, I mean, it was confusing. So that needs to be very clear that is what type of ballot that is. If it's been identified as canceled, it needs to be very clear. And I thought that was a good thing. The other thing, Mark, that this bill did is it did retain, where nursing homes, where the administrator can get those ballots and send them in for folks in the nursing home, and it retained that option. So I thought that was important in that bill.
Yes, it does.
Carlton, anything?
Evans, consistency is the key, and we're going to see that theme play out through a few of these bills, is that we needed to be consistent with our application, consistent about who's in charge. And I think a lot of, if anybody who's listening to this with an open mind will realize that, we as voters just assume that these ballots are kept under lock and key like Fort Knox. And that the procedures are exact and understood. And we have discovered through the testimony of the people who are on the front lines, that's where all this information came from. Through the testimony of those people on the front lines, we have discovered that there were gaps in understanding of procedure and gaps in the handling of ballots, and that allows things to be called into question. And so we're bringing this all into uniformity so that everybody knows what to do and everybody can have confidence in the process.
Yeah, and let me say this, and then, Mark, I want to come back to you about the County Board of Election Commissioners being provided with a daily count of absentee applications and why that's important. But one of the things that I think we need to remember in all of this is that we want to make sure that every vote counts, and we want to make sure that every step of the process with each of these votes is protected for the integrity so that everybody knows that when whoever is handling these ballots, that they are going to be treated in a manner that makes sure that somebody else's doesn't get bumped out because they were not handled in the proper way. All right. So what about the absentee, the daily count of absentee application? What's so big about that? Page 3 of the bill. And we're talking about House Bill 1715, which is now Act 736.
Right. Well, it requires the county clerk to provide the County Board of Election Commissioners a daily count of absentee applications and ballots. And I think that allows the Election Commission to see if there are huge spikes in the number that are turned in any one day so that they can identify whether there may be potential fraud, this ballot harvesting, so to speak, to be able to investigate, take a look maybe at the number that came in, but maybe even look at the application itself to make sure that it's not being that there's not an opportunity or an attempt to defraud and turn in false applications. Another thing was that after the outer envelope of an absentee ballot's opened, a county clerk or the deputies cannot have access to the ballots inside, the ballot paperwork or the inner envelope. You're talking about the county clerk. You're talking about an elected official that really should not be putting their hands on ballots, whether they are in that election cycle or not. The people who are sworn to provide this security and to have to attest to the validity of an election is the election commissioners, and they are the ones that and their designees, their staff, and hopefully we can, in some of these counties, we can do a better job of making sure that the staff actually answers to the election commissioners rather than the county clerk. But that's another story. That's another bill that we weren't able to totally get through, but there are some mechanisms in place to protect.
And we probably need to add that the county clerks are in many, and I would even say most cases around the state, work hand in glove with the election commission. But under the law, the election commission is the one that's ultimately responsible and have to certify votes and things like this. So therefore, it's important that be made clear that the election commissioners are in charge, and the clerk is, in effect, serves in a staff type capacity for that. I don't want to take anything away from the job the clerks do around the state. They're, in most cases, really hardworking and wonderful. Been a few issues that have come up, and that's why we had these bills.
And we got to go to a break, but I'll make this statement, and Jack, Carlton, y'all weigh in, and then we're going to take a break. And that's what people need to realize. The vast majority, the clerks are working hand in hand with the election commissioner. But if there's a lawsuit, it's going to be the election commissioners that are going to get dragged into court.
That's right.
The responsibilities are delegated to the clerk. And the reason it's been that way is because all of them work hand in hand. And these laws are not going to be impacting the vast majority of the clerks or the counties because they're all running like a smooth oiled machine. But if something is wrong in one county, two county, three county, or it begins to happen in one county and it progresses across the state, now all of a sudden you got a huge problem in a statewide race like a Tom Cotton or a Bozeman or a constitutional officer where it could go the wrong direction because everybody's not operating to the same standard. Jack, y'all got anything to weigh in on that?
Well, just real quick, the way we handle absentee ballots is very important, and it's going to be more important in the future. Because of the pandemic, the number of absentee ballots went up, but people are now used to that. So even if the pandemic goes away, that number is going to continue to be higher, and it's kind of a new process to a lot of people. So we need to streamline that, and this bill helps do that.
Carlton?
And I'd say one thing also, and you really hit on one of the most important issues that the average voter was completely unaware of, and that is the separation of duties and the absolute line of authority for the elections runs through the election commission, not the clerks. The clerks are there to assist, but it's the election commission that's in charge. And when you have a situation where the election commission and the staff provided by the clerk's office are at odds, we have to recognize the constitutional, by statute, line of authority comes through that election commission. And when I've been able to explain that to voters who have had concerns or questions about any of these bills, once they understand that this is following constitutional law, that they're much more understanding of the reason why we had to pass some of these bills to be able to get that in statute so that it can be in practice. Because you're right, the people who sign their names for the validity of the election are the election commissioners, not the clerks. The clerk's only statutory authority for elections is voter registration and a little bit of the early voting.
All right, very good. I am getting the hand wave by Heidi that we have to take a break. You're listening to the Kim Hammer Show. We're talking about the election bills that were passed this last session. I've got Mark Johnson, Mark Lowry, Jack Ladyman, and Carlton Wing, state reps and senators on the Kim Hammer Show. Come back and we'll pick up the next bill in a sec. Hey, welcome back to the Kim Hammer Show. You're listening to the Kim Hammer Show, dealing with the election bills that were passed this last session that are being signed into law by the governor. I have in studio today Senator Mark Johnson and Representative Mark Lowry. I've got joining me on the phone Representative Jack Ladyman and also Representative Carlton Wing. And we're talking about the election bills, making sure that you got good, accurate, factual information, not hyped up stuff like some of the things you've been hearing. And let me say this, and then we're going to pick up House Bill 1615, which was lead sponsor Jack Ladyman. So, Jack, get your memory going here, because we're going to talk about your 1615 and what it did. And one thing I wanted to mention, one of the things that we were successful in getting done this session, which was critical, was that we were able to get the State Board of Election Commissioners under Daniel Schultz. We were able to get him 3 new positions. Now, why is that important? Well, number one, he oversees all the elections in the state of Arkansas, and he was very short-handed. Some of what the new responsibilities are going to be assigned to those 3 new individuals, they're going to be handling investigations, but also they're going to be handling education of the county board election commissioners, poll workers, because one of the bills that we'll look at, if we don't get to today, we'll get it on the next show, is that we are heightening the educational requirement of poll workers and county board election commissioners and state board election commissioners to make sure that they understand what the laws say and also what is required in the event that they see something not going right. All right. So with that being said, we're going to go to House Bill 1615. Lead sponsor was Representative Jack Ladyman. Okay, Jack, take it away and get into the nuts and bolts about House Bill 1615 that is transmitted to the governor's office, waiting to be signed in as of an hour ago. Hopefully that'll get signed this week. All right, Jack.
Yeah, Kim, as you recall, that one bounced around quite a bit through committees, had some changes to it. And it primarily did about 3 things. I'll try to hit all those and be brief. But one of the issues that I faced, and I know other folks faced in some of the rural areas, was getting poll workers from the area in a small population area region to work. Just could not get poll workers. And one of the issues there is that if a person is on the ballot, even though they're unopposed, none of their relatives, 2 generations up or down, or their husband, can serve as a poll worker. So one thing that this bill does is it allows in precincts where there are 1,000 or less voters, it allows those relatives to work the polls if their relative is unopposed. So that's a new change. In the past, they could not do that. And I had a couple of small towns in my area that just could not find poll workers in the area who knew the people, knew the process there. So I thought that was a real important thing. It was debated heavily, and we did get that through. The second thing was closing of polling places in rural areas. And we're seeing a lot more of that because of the voting centers and trying to be more efficient. The new voting machines are expensive, so counties are trying to cut down on the number of machines that they need. But an unintended consequence there is that a lot of rural areas are losing their polling places. And so when they do that, then it's difficult for them to vote. So what this bill does is, if the county election commissioners choose unanimously to close a rural voting center, then that can be questioned by any qualified voter, and it would go to the state board for a review. So it gives a voter an opportunity to question why that's being closed and to give reasons why it should not be closed. And it goes to a second set of eyes to look at that. The third thing in that bill, there's a segment in there that requires, if someone comes in, they need to be checked to see if they had an absentee ballot. And we have the electronic log of that now. So if they did request an absentee ballot, but they showed up on election day to vote, then they can only vote with a what's it called?
Provisional ballot.
A provisional ballot to make sure that they don't vote twice. So in a nutshell, that's the bill.
So if people voted twice before?
Surely not.
Well, we don't know that, but we think there's possibility. I don't know that there's evidence of that, but it could happen. And again, this is a way of refining our election system and, maintaining the integrity of the system.
And I think that's an important point, because one of the things we want to do is close the loopholes where things like that could happen. I know that was, one of the debated points about removing Monday from the early voting cycle, was to make sure that if somebody had voted absentee and then they turned around and showed up to vote in person, that their vote would not count twice, because there wasn't enough time between Monday and Tuesday for some county clerks or those that were running the election to be able to verify that absentee ballot count versus that in-person count. That was one of the arguments that was thrown up.
Well, and I think the issue was also early voting. If you voted early on Monday,
As well as absentee.
or absentee, and that's why we were trying to close down Monday, is that there may not be enough time to update the electronic logbook, and when they show up the next day, it may not show that they had voted on Monday.
And of course, it's important to remember that it's easy to see it through the lens of Pulaski County or Saline County. But in these smaller counties, as we learned from the Democratic county clerk of Prairie County, they are understaffed. They don't have the staff to get these poll books up to date in 36 hours or whatever. It's a burden on them. And so a lot of the large county clerks thought, well, we don't care. We've got 50 people work for us to do this. And they weren't sensitive to the problems in rural Arkansas of getting this done accurately.
Well, and one of the things that was cited in that letter that was provided too was the lack of dependable internet service, that when you've got a download from the Secretary of State in that short period of time, if you have a flaw, there just wasn't enough breathing room to bring the level of comfort I think that a lot of people were trying to get to.
Right.
All right.
Kim, speaking of internet, you pointed to one bill, 1595, that Representative Hammer was a co-sponsor on, and Representative Milligan actually was the lead sponsor. Pardon?
Senator.
Once you're a representative, you're always a representative. People don't forget.
I meant Representative Ladyman.
See, I didn't even listen. He was listening. I wasn't even listening.
Representative Ladyman. What it does is it requires that electronic voting machines, not be hooked up to the internet. This is one of the concerns that many had in other states, was the Dominion machines were actually able to maybe be manipulated through an internet connection. And so I know Jack and Representative Milligan carried that on the House end.
Yeah, and Representative Milligan was another one we could add to the name. Go ahead, Jack or Carlton. It's one of y'all.
I thought that was a really important bill. It was just something that I thought about when we were having our meetings. And I actually saw a video of those voting machines. Y'all mentioned the company in other states. What was the name of it?
Dominion.
The Dominion machines. I watched a video of how they connect those things up, and there's actually a process in the written information there on how to connect it to the internet. And I thought, we do not need that. And that was a very simple bill that just said no voting machine in Arkansas can be connected to the internet. And John, being a freshman, I talked to him about that. He's like me. He's an ex-mayor. And I asked him if he would run that bill, and he ran that and went through with flying colors. Very simple, but very important.
All right. Jack, anything else on 1615 that we didn't cover?
Well, just the purpose of that bill, Kim, and if y'all heard my speech from the well, I'm very concerned about suppressing the vote in rural areas in Arkansas. 75% of our cities are less than 2,000 people, and we need to make sure that those people, their vote is not suppressed, and to make it harder for them to vote. So I want to look at what can we do, to make sure that those folks still vote. So that was the purpose of that bill.
Very good. All right. Mark Johnson, you had Senate Bill 498, a short bill, but has some substance to it about the State Board of Election Commissioners for evaluations.
Well, it's important that we remember that, a lot of people think, oh, well, the county clerk and the Secretary of State run elections. That's just not true. The State Board of Election Commissioners which is appointed by the governor and some other officials who are not, and they are specifically not elected officials, and the county board of election commissioners, who are made up of in each county 2 people appointed by the majority party and 1 person appointed by the minority party. Those 3 commissioners run the elections in the counties, and that's the law. Everyone else is sort of a satellite and staff to help people do that, but those are the responsible parties. There is a procedure in the law, had been, in case there was some kind of a complaint, a written complaint about an election law violation or irregularity, that complaint would be sent by the County Board of Election Commissioners formally to the county clerk and the prosecuting attorney. Once again, 2 elected officials. So we changed that in this simple bill, Senate Bill 498. We changed that to the State Board of Election Commissioners, who have the staff and the expertise to actually evaluate the complaints. Now, ultimately, it might end up at the Attorney General's office or a prosecutor's office, but the investigation should be done by that nonpartisan state organization.
Okay.
That's all that little bill did.
Okay. How about Senate Bill
557, probably.
557.
557 was a bill. It amended the duties of the county board to add the supervision, to make sure they supervise all the election commissioners, and they can delegate that authority to, and I love the term of art that former Representative Doug House, who's a retired JAG colonel in the Army, used the term detail as a military term. You're detailed to do that job. And it makes clear that the staff of the county clerk or other county officials can be detailed to do jobs, but it makes it clear that the election commission is in charge and that these others are simply assisting them to do their duties. It also makes clear that there's nothing in that law that would require a staff member for, say, the clerk or whatever, to do anything that was contrary to state or federal law as far as their other duties are concerned. It just makes it clear that the line of supervision is from the County Board of Election Commissioners, who ultimately have to certify the results of the election and obviously should be the ones that are supervising those that carry out the duties during the election.
All right. Carlton, you and I sponsored Senate Bill 487, an act concerning the establishment and alteration of precinct boundaries, polling sites, and vote centers to amend the Arkansas election law for other purposes. Why don't you pick up and run on that one if you remember it?
Yeah, and really that kind of gets back to what we were talking about in the last segment about the statutory line of authority. So when we, the people who have the authority for the elections, the people who have to sign their names that this election was done correctly, they're the ones that are in charge. And in this case, they're the ones that should be selecting because, again, they have the authority over the early vote locations, and it's the County Board of Election Commissioners that are in charge of that. It's just very simple. That was a simple bill, but it established that they are in charge of those vote locations as well.
It also has in there about unauthorized access to the voter registration database and unauthorized access to the voting equipment and voter materials.
And that was, again, this is something that our election commissioners had reported that there were just a few cases, a few counties that had issues with unauthorized access to that. And again, our system, especially with the technology that we have now, should be above reproach. There should be no question of how things run, and we need to, as we say, avoid the very appearance of evil so that everybody knows exactly what is taking place and that it's above board, and they can have confidence in the entire process, and that the people who are in charge have the authority to implement their responsibilities.
All right, let's talk about 486, the Devil's Bill. 486, this is where we took water away from people standing in line.
Now we're going to have to start talking about misinformation.
Yeah, I'd hate to do that, wouldn't you?
Yes.
All right, so let me. I actually carried this one, but I'm gonna let y'all. I'm gonna let y'all lay the groundwork for it. So each one of y'all chime in. This is 486, and it's an act to amend the law concerning electioneering, to amend the law concerning penalties for misdemeanor offenses related to voting, and for other purposes. I should have Trent Gardner on here because Trent got up and spoke in the well on this one, because down in his area, which goes pretty much from Sheridan all the way down to El Dorado, if I remember
Goes
right.
to the Louisiana line.
Yeah, he's got a big old district. He got up and testified in the well about seeing this personally, and also I know it happened, here in Pulaski County. It happened some others. So let me just open mic to you four guys to talk about your thoughts on this bill. And let me just read it in case you don't have it up. It's a person shall not enter or remain in the area within 100 feet of the primary exterior entrance to the building where voting is taking place, except for a person entering or leaving a building where voting is taking place for lawful purposes. Open mic. Y'all just jump in and start giving your thoughts, and then I'll add mine at the end.
Well, Kim, let me add one thing on that. You ran that in committee on the House side. Carolyn Brown ran it on the floor. But if you recall, when you were presenting that bill, and I forget the organization that was speaking against it, but the lady said, well, we don't need this. That's the law now. And then I asked her a question about, well, what if someone walks up with a T-shirt on and just say, hi, how you doing? But they're wearing a campaign T-shirt or something. Is that illegal or not? And her comment was, well, yeah, that's probably illegal, but, it's not really clear. And I said, well, then we need this law because it is not clear. And that's the whole point of the law, I believe.
Well, and we try very hard to make sure, as candidates, we stand out at the polls or we stand at early voting. I know out in Maumelle at one of our early voting places, it's in the rec center. And when we have to go to the restroom, which is going to possibly put us within 100 feet, if we're wearing a T-shirt, and I tell my campaign workers, if you're wearing a T-shirt that says vote for Mark Lowry, cover it up. We want to make sure that we're above reproach. This time, especially because we had long lines that would extend beyond the 100 feet, I even told my campaign workers, listen, if you're set up outside the 100 feet and the line happens to extend to where you are.
Especially with COVID when it went to social distancing.
Yeah, I
6 feet apart.
Why don't you just move away from there? I don't want any of the voters that are in line to feel like they're being pressured or someone's breathing down their neck. The truth is these people that are saying that we're being evil because we're declining water, if they want to give water to someone, they probably ought to be giving it to people that are at the end of the line that's well outside the 100 feet. They don't need to be inside the 100 feet. And that's really all we've done here is make sure that we have that, I think, Mark.
Safe space.
Yeah, safe space. I think you maybe even referred to it as being sacred.
It is sacred ground.
I don't know if it's
I use
sacred
that
or
term.
not, but
It is under the law.
Under the law, it is. And we're just protecting that, and we're making sure that election judges have enough work on their hands. They don't need to be making these judgments of whether, well, does this person belong here or not? Or, they don't have a campaign T-shirt on, but they're giving out water or a candy bar. What do I do? Well, now this law tells them what they do, that it's a strict adherence, that you should not be within that.
Well, a few years ago, we had a candidate who was convicted of this in East Arkansas, was giving out half pints of vodka before the election. So, I mean, it's like, well, gosh, I not only can't get a bottle of water, I can't even get a bottle of vodka. So, any way you look at it, I believe it's electioneering within the 100 feet. And this law just simply clarified that.
Carlton?
Yeah, let me add to this. I mean, this came from voter complaints. This bill came as a direct result from voters complaining about being approached inside that 100-foot mark. They didn't like that. They want that safe space. By the time they get to the polling place, they pretty much know who they're voting for, and they really don't want to be bothered. And so we give that safe space to them. This was one of the most, not the most, but one of the most egregious examples of a misinformation campaign purposefully designed to take people away from the topic of what we were addressing, which was voters did not want to be approached by these groups inside that safe space. And in Arkansas, it's 100 feet. You can do anything you want outside of 100 feet. You can hand out bottled water. You can hand out snacks, treats, whatever. Everything's fair game out there. But inside that 100-foot mark, that's where we've designated our safe space. And 33 states in the United States have a designated safe space and protect that for the voters.
And if I remember right, go ahead.
I was just going to say it was kind of offensive to see that people were willing to create a known lie and purposefully send it out there so that uninformed people would go out and repeat it, that we were somehow trying to take away water from thirsty voters. How cruel. No, 100-foot, you can do anything. Inside that 100-foot, we have to protect the sanctity of that space because the voters asked for this.
And one thing you mentioned about the number of states that have a safety zone. I called it when I presented it in the well a sacred zone because I think it's sacred. But some of those states go beyond 100 feet. If I remember right, I think one was like 200 feet. And so it's not uncommon, nor is it suppressing anybody. One thing I thought that was good too, and we want to try to remove as much confusion as we can, but as elected officials, we can't be within the 100-foot. So why would you let anybody else within the 100-foot? Because that's what people expect when they get there. Now, the one thing that's important about this bill is if you are conducting business on the premise lawfully, the best example is a library. You're returning a library book and you're flowing in and out to return that book, you're not going to get in trouble. If you're at a church and you're a parishioner, you're not going to get in trouble. If you're at the community center, as Mark said a while ago, and you're going in to play basketball, you're not going to get in trouble. This is for those people that wanted to put a table up and obstruct access to the building by forcing people to have to walk by them, which we didn't even discuss this, but it was brought up about it violated the American Disability Act because it put people with disabilities in an inconvenient position if they had to walk around those tables. I got like 3 minutes, so I'm going to give each one of you 30 seconds to say what you want to say about this bill or anything else in summary.
Hey, Kim, one thing I'd like to say, those folks, if you're outside the 100 feet, you've got the freedom to walk away if you don't like the campaign. When you're in line, you don't have that freedom to walk away from that campaign. I think that's important.
Good point. All right, Carlton, 30 seconds. I know it's hard, but 30 seconds.
I think it's real important that we respect the wishes of the voters. They have brought up these issues. A lot of these other bills are brought up by the election commissioners and poll workers themselves. The reason why these bills are being brought forward is to make it a much more streamlined, secure, and a process that generates faith in the system.
Mark Lowry?
Well, as I mentioned a while ago, we did have long lines, and these lines snaked well beyond the 100 feet. And I think, frankly, I even felt like our campaign workers should give some space to those people that are in line, whether they're outside the 100 foot or not. I think that's the fair thing to do to voters who really, as we've said, they've probably got their mind made up. They don't want to be harassed while they're standing in line. And so this is a good law.
Mark Johnson.
Let me speak to the whole package, Kim. The left has seen, not just in Arkansas, but in other states, where people have stepped up and said, these liberal groups, I'll call them leftist groups even, have figured out loopholes that they could use to exploit voter intimidation within the ballot area and how to take a peek at absentee ballots before they're supposed to, and all kinds of things that were pretty imaginative. You have to give them credit for that. Arkansas and other states have come up with laws to clean this up, to maintain the integrity of the election. And the left screams voter suppression, Jim Crow, and all these things. And it's not just inaccurate, it's a damned lie. And so just want to let voters know it was a damned lie, and read carefully and see what it really is.
Mark? Okay.
Yep.
All right, so I'm down the last 2 minutes. You've been listening to the Kim Hammer Show. I've had on as my guest today. I've got one more comment to make, but let me make sure I give recognition to my guest. Calling in, Representative Jack Ladyman, Representative Carlton Wing. In studio, I've got Representative Mark Lowry and Senator Mark Johnson. We were all part of the team, and we tried to call out everybody's name. There were more folks, but the one thing I want you to remember, we just didn't pull these things out of the hat. We've got some more. We'll come back on another show and talk about the rest of them, because I want to bring in some of the other folks that weren't even in part of the work group, because you got Alan Clark introduced some good bills, and there are other senators and representatives that dropped in, and I think that just expresses the desire for those who want the voting system to be as fair and equal. If I lose, I lose, but I want to lose fairly. I don't want to lose because somebody creatively figured a workaround and utilized it to their advantage. That's part of what all these election bills are about and what they're all intended to do. All right, you've been listening to the Kim Hammer Show here on 101.1 FM, The Answer. I appreciate you listening. Hope you have a great rest of the day. We'll be back again to talk about the rest of the election bills. And in the meantime, you can go up to www.thekimhammershow.com. We'll try to get all these bills posted up there to where you can just go up there and find them in a simple and easy fashion. Hope you have a great day, and thank God we live in America. Thank God you live in Arkansas. This is Kim Hammer on the Kim Hammer Show. Thank you for listening. You can go up to my website in order to get some of the information that we're going to be looking at on the show today, to www.thekimhammershow.com. That's www.thekimhammershow.com. What we're going to do today is we're going to replay a segment or a show back from May 1st. And on May 1st, I had a panel of legislators in that were very instrumental in passing legislation to address some of the election integrity issues that we felt were existing in Arkansas at that time. This past week, we were rewarded for our work in that the Heritage Foundation, which is a national organization, for the first time scored states on their election integrity scorecard. As a result of the work that we did this past legislative session, we tied as the fourth most secure state in the nation when it comes to election integrity. Obviously, our goal is that we want to be number one, and there will be areas that they have pointed out on their scorecard that we will be working on. But we had a show a couple of weeks ago where I had the Secretary of State's office in talking about all the various aspects of, do we need to do a forensic audit and all those type of things that people are having such a buzz about. But what we wanted to do today, because of this report card coming out this week, is replay that show from back in the first weekend of May that explains the bills that we did that helped us get as high as a score as we did on the Heritage Foundation Election Integrity Scorecard. You can see a copy of that scorecard by going up to my website, thekimhammershow.com. We have it on there. You can click on it and go through all the details. We are right up there with states like Florida and Georgia. That should make you, as an Arkansan, feel safe and secure that when you get ready to go vote in any of the elections between now, but especially in 22, that you can know that your vote is going to count and be counted for. I hope that you enjoy this show as it talks about the legislation that we got passed this last session. And I want to say thank you to all the fellow legislators that made it possible that we are as high as a state as we are when it comes to election integrity. Hope you enjoy the show.